Hey guys, it's Wolf Wengler. That's a needle and seat set up out of a Holley carburetor. And just to make sure everybody's on the same page, with the needle and seat, the fuel comes in from the fuel inlet, the fuel line that's coming to your carburetor from your gas tank. The fuel comes into the needle and seat here, goes down through right about where the O-ring is. There's an orifice. This one here is 110 thousandths, the letter H. You can look up what the letters are, but there are different codes with letters for different size orifices. But the fuel comes in here, goes down through that orifice, and this little pin on the bottom, this sits on the float in the carburetor. So as the float drops down, this pin drops down, the Viton needle in this one here comes off of the seat, and fuel is fed into the float bowl through this window down here on the bottom. When you have enough fuel in the float bowl, the float comes up, it pushes on the pin here, and it closes the needle and seat, and no more fuel comes into the carburetor, comes into the float bowl. So the problem with this is that when that needle is all the way down and the fuel is squirting out through this lower window, the fuel gets aerated. So there's a different kind of needle and seat that doesn't have this window in it. So the fuel comes in here, goes around the needle that's here. The needle actually has like a triangle shape, and then it comes out the bottom, and that's below the fuel level in the bowl, so the fuel doesn't get aerated. So in the video that I did about fuel pressure, I explained how the fuel comes into the carburetor and then goes through the needle and seat that are right here inside the carburetor, and that lets the fuel get into the float bowl. And I explained that a larger orifice in the needle and seat lets you run a little bit less fuel pressure, and that helps reduce the amount of aeration that you get when that fuel squirts under pressure into the float bowl. There's a needle and seat made that exits fuel from the bottom. It actually delivers the fuel into the float bowl underwater below the level of fuel in the float bowl, so the aeration is reduced considerably. So here are two needle and seats. The one on the left is a BLP bottom exit, bottom feeder needle and seat, and the one on the right is a traditional Holley. And you could see where if the fuel comes out the bottom as opposed to coming out this window here on the standard one, it's much further down inside the float bowl, and it's not going to be aerated nearly as much. And here's the two of them looking at them from the end, and you can see how that bottom feeder, it's just a triangular shaped needle and seat where the fuel comes out around all sides of the triangle, as opposed to the other one where the fuel comes out that. Look at the aeration in the first test versus the second. They cut windows in the float bowls of the carburetor on their dragsters, so you could see the difference between fuel coming in through a regular needle and seat versus fuel coming in through one of their bottom feeders that exits fuel on the bottom. So this is how it sits inside the carburetor with that little tab on the float. And as the float drops down, it frees that needle up. When the float comes up, when there's more fuel in the float bowl, it closes that, pushes up on that little pin, and that closes the needle. The float itself is a pretty critical piece inside the carburetor. It needs to be just the right weight so it has just enough buoyancy where it's not too light and it doesn't come up hard enough, and it's not too heavy and it doesn't seal right. So with high-end floats like this one here, it comes with its own weight certificate, and you're expected to weigh this every now and then to make sure that the float hasn't picked up any excess weight by fuel being bled into it. These are from Bolaw's BLP Performance, and they're pretty impervious to that, but I still change them out every couple of years. So you take out the screw and take the nut off, and then you can, sometimes you need a little help. Then you can thread out the needle and seat. Conventional one, bottom feed one. Doesn't have that bottom window in it. The fuel comes in here and comes out the bottom below the level of fuel in the float bowl, as opposed to the original one that goes in here and comes out that window. New one's good. Drop it in. Screw it down to about the same level that you were at before. If you wanted to be real anal, you could have measured this with your calipers before, but this is going to be a little different. You're going to need to double check the float fuel level in the float bowl. There, while I'm in my box of carburetor parts, these are good gaskets. The Holly blue gaskets used to be okay, but they've started to come apart. The blue comes off them. It's just like everything else from China. They're crap. These are much better gaskets. They come from VLP. Here's a used one. It's thick. They seal well, and the holes are all right. VLP stuff you want to get from them is good stuff.